Welcome. In this lesson, we're going to learn a little bit more about starter themes. If you're building a site from scratch and you want to start off with some core template tags and theme files, then a starter theme is what you're looking for.
Now, the first thing to note about starter theme basics is that they are going to include a bunch of common theme template files. So this may be things like page.php, single.php, your functions.php, all of these really common theme template files. And they may have a lot of them. They may have all of them. They may take different approaches, but they're all going to come with a bunch of these files. And the idea behind that is if you're going to use the same files in every WordPress project, why not just automatically give them to you to start off with? Now, while you're going to have those, it's likely that you have no CSS styles. There may be a style sheet, but there's probably not going to be many styles applied. Now, the exception to this is that some of them include things like Bootstrap or Foundation, which are CSS frameworks. So in this case, you are getting a bunch of CSS, but they're not necessarily going to have already made decisions about how your site should look and how Bootstrap or Foundation and these frameworks should be implemented. So you'll have access to it. It'll be included there, but it may not have much styling or any out of the box. And the idea here is they don't want to assume what your project is going to look like. They want to give you the core markup and then let you apply your CSS how you need to. Now, in addition to all of this, there is going to be some extra functionality in your functions.php file. They might be adding a bunch of little hooks and things in that just make your work easier. They may be assuming that you want to have some extra functionality. They may be coding out things that aren't in WordPress by default, but a lot of developers find really helpful. So chances are you're going to find a functions.php file and you're going to find a bunch of extra stuff in there. Now, along with that, there may actually be some extra hooks in the template file. So maybe before and after the loops, you might have hooks added that aren't in WordPress by default, but are now in your theme, which means that you could more easily programmatically control it with the functions.php file. Now, another thing that you'll see in these is they follow a modular file architecture. So what this means is that they're going to take a big file and break it up into smaller files. And often these smaller files are reused in different places. So you may see a larger file that's just kind of a wrapper, and then it'll swap out what little files go in there. And then two larger templates might include the same smaller included file. And this architecture is pretty common. And it really is a best practice and something we'll look at when we start building out all of our stuff. So here we're taking it even further, and some of these are going to include workflow tools. So things like build tools like Gulp or Webpack, NPM, things like that are really common, especially for JavaScript developers, more front-end development, things maybe like Composer that allow you to bundle in different libraries and things and save them in an easy way. So the more powerful among these are also going to include that. And then finally, I'll mention that usually you download a starter theme and you use that code. So you just start editing that style or that starter theme, making whatever changes you want, and you don't apply a child theme to a starter theme. Now, this isn't always the case, but it generally is the case. So here's some basics about starter themes. I think this is really important stuff. And I will point out that not all of this is going to make sense to you right now. Everything I'm saying, some of it may be a little bit over your head. But the thing is after you watch the next section or two, you're going to come back to this section again, and it's all going to make a lot more sense. And you're going to have a whole another level of understanding about what's really going on behind the scenes. So with all that said, I want to talk about a few specific WordPress starter themes. Okay, there's tons out there, but I'm going to talk about a few major ones. And the first one is called Underscore. And we'll look at the site for this in a second, but it is built by the WordPress core team. So the people who build the core WordPress themes that get bundled with WordPress, what they do is as they build these new themes each year, new one comes out each year, they start with Underscore as the starter theme, and then after they build the theme, if they find helpful things, they'll contribute those back, so Underscore keeps improving. And it's probably your number one go-to place for a good blank solid starter theme. It's been vetted, it's got some best practices in there for accessibility, really solid starter theme. So the next one I want to mention is a personal favorite of mine, Joints WP. And the reason I like this one is because it's bundled with Foundation, the CSS framework from the folks at Zurb. And I'm a big Foundation fan. I like it. I've used it for a while. And because of this, I really like Joints WP because it already has my favorite CSS framework bundled in there. And it has a lot of other great things, some great functionality, some really good architecture, and I'm a big fan of it. So I'm going to mention that one here as an alternative to Underscore. And here's another really popular one. I don't really use this one as much, but this is really popular with folks who use Bootstrap. And what they want is Bootstrap integrated into WordPress theme, some of the basic things there, some extra functionality there, all really helpful, all really great, especially if you're a big fan of Bootstrap. Now, the last on this list I'll mention is definitely the most powerful of all of these. And in the world of hardcore WordPress developers who are banging out new sites all the time, custom builds, Sage really is a favorite for a good reason. And it's part of a larger development framework called Roots. And we'll look at this in a moment. But Sage is going to give you some of those CSS frameworks, but it's also going to give you a lot more out of the box. When I talked about workflow development tools, things like that, that's what Sage is going to have. So it really is for the modern, intermediate to hardcore developer, but at some point in your career, I would really recommend you check out Sage. It's not what we're going to be using at this point, but it's a really great option. So now we're hopping over into the browser. I just want to show you the sites for each of these. Underscores.me is going to be kind of that go-to default WordPress one. You could read a little bit about it, see all the different contributors that have contributed to it. And to get this is pretty simple. You just put in the name of it. You can add some slugs, some other information. This is all stuff that shows up in your style.css file, and go ahead and generate it. If you're a Sass person and you want that Sass file or the Sass CSS there to work with that, then you could get that version of it as well simply by checking that box. So underscores.me, we'll be coming back to this one, but just wanted to start off here. Next up, we've got Joints WP. Again, I said a big favorite of mine. You can see at time of launching their getting ready to roll out their beta, so under continual development. And again, the main reason you want to go to this one is if you like Foundation and you like having your WordPress files built out that way. So it does have a little bit of workflow tools and things like that. You can get Sass running, and it does have some nice architecture for how it's all built as well as your documentation. So check out Joints WP. So here we have Understrap, and you can see they're focusing on the Bootstrap component of it. There are some things about Bootstrap that can be a little bit tricky to implement in WordPress, especially when it comes to working with menus and getting them to look exactly like they do inside of Bootstrap, as you would expect. But here we could see that it's also going to give you a Sass option, and it's adding things like NPM and Gulp for your workflow tools. So that could be something that's really helpful. It also has a little bit different architecture because it has this child theme ability where instead of editing the actual theme itself, you're going to be customizing it in a child theme. But you already know how to do that. Again, a number of contributors, a really popular theme among folks who like to work with WordPress and Bootstrap. So last on our list here, we're going to come over to Roots.io, and Roots is a framework. So it's a number of tools. There's a stack for local development. There's a boilerplate for projects, how you're going to organize all your files. And then there's Sage, which is the WordPress starter theme. And this among them is probably the most powerful. Like I said, it's got all the workflow tools, the HTML5 boilerplate, which you may be familiar with, ARIA roles, things like that that are really important. And it also has a great book, which I would recommend after you work through this course a bit. Don't worry, there'll still be more that you could learn. And I would suggest checking it out at some point. But it is more advanced, so we could see it's doing things like introducing Webpack in the future, which is kind of becoming the more preferred option over some of these other compiling tools or modular building tools. So Sage here, you could grab that from GitHub. You could check out the docs. They have some great resources, educational material as well, and a huge community of really serious devs. So just keep this one in the back of your mind as we go through all of this.